So our next panel is on business cases for connected vehicles. Just as a opening, connected vehicles and their data have made new business opportunities available that weren't possible before. And these new business cases span a number of industries and enabled existing and new organizations to define and exploit new opportunities to deliver new value to the market. So this diverse panel will discuss new business landscape and emerging business cases that are facilitated by increased vehicle connectivity. So I'm going to bring the panelists up one at a time, and I'll introduce them by name and title and organization. So first we have Ansgar Lindwedel? Okay, for Director of Software-Defined Vehicle Ecosystem Development from Robert Bosch. So please, Ansgar. Yeah. Next would be Pedro. I should have asked Pacheco. Should have asked you guys how to pronounce your last names. My apologies. He's the Vice President of Automotive and Smart Mobility for Gartner. So welcome, Pedro. Next would be Thomas Wurdig, Manager of Onboard Software and Hardware Development at Mercedes-Benz AG. Thank you, Thomas. And then Christoph Ludewig is the VP of OEM Europe for Geotab. Welcome. So the way we're going to do this is similar to what we did in the OEM panel. We're going to invite each of the panelists to present briefly and sort of set their thesis for the rest of their comments during the panel session. And so we're going to start with Ansgar and go to the right. So Ansgar, please, we've got these up first. Yes, and so Ansgar, please feel free to introduce yourself more and set your thesis.
Yeah, thanks first of all, Steve, for having us here. So my thesis is that by 2030, hardly no software developer for automotive will maybe know what CAN is, what safety requirements are, what all the other nitty and gritty buses are, Graham and the folks here talked about. And from my point of view, they also should not know what this is, because that's what we are doing here. In my view, and this is also important from a business perspective, because on the one hand side, we believe that we should not bother the guys and girls who are working on software innovation with all these difficult questions in the end. And this will also drive our business, because if we don't need to bother them with all these difficult technologies, they can focus on innovations, what we want them to do, right? So when I joined Bosch 16 years ago, my first job was implementing two-dimensional maps where one signal or one value came in and I needed to find the corresponding value, and I was implementing that in software. And I hated me doing that, because that was really awkward doing. And I bet that within 5 to 10 years we will not find any talent and attract talents if we tell them they are implementing things in C and they need to think about ISO 26262 and all this stuff. And that's why, from my perspective, also business-wise, it's important to work on this abstraction we need.
Okay, thank you. Pedro, please.
Yes, hello. First of all, great pleasure to be here. If you could move to the yeah, thank you. So I will talk just about business. So I'll not talk about the technicalities. I'll talk about business. And the reason for this is extremely simple. The main challenges to the success of the connected vehicle are business. They're not technical, incredibly enough. So the first thing is, connected car is about profit making. Every automaker that still hasn't understood this is going to be in deep trouble in the future. And the reason for this is the following. The revenue generation model of automakers will change dramatically in the future. You imagine a future where the vast majority of cars on the road are battery electric vehicles. So what's going to happen is that the cash cow of automakers, which is after sales, that is going to mostly disappear, because let's say electric vehicles don't have a great deal of maintenance needs. So there's not much money to make in terms of after sales. You're going to see that electric powertrains will be much more durable. So these cars are going to stay around for longer. So therefore, you're going to sell less cars. So where are you going to make the money? The money for the winning automakers is going to be made with selling software to the end customers. This means selling digital features, selling digital services. The winners. Not every automaker will get there, unfortunately. The ones that realize it will probably be the winners. So therefore, let's say this is a reason also why practically every main automaker has decided or has communicated externally that they want to transform into a technology company or a software company. Because obviously this is clear. This is where the future is making money with software. However, the problem is that easier said than done, because many automakers have committed billions of dollars or euros, have committed thousands of software engineers, but in reality, let's say, this probably is not going to be enough, because the main obstacle to success is culture. As Katrina had said, earlier, and I fully agree. And for my work, I basically work with several different automakers. And the culture is the main obstacle. And it all starts at the top of the organizations, where basically you have an automaker that says, we want to become a technology company, and the leadership of this company comes from a traditional auto world. They don't understand what it is to be a tech company. So it starts from the top and then cascades to the bottom. And there they are, need to competing with Tesla, which is led by Mr. Tech himself. How is that going to work? It's going to be pretty hard. So the culture is not there, is not being addressed so well, and then therefore this cascades to the bottom and in the ability of attracting and retaining the best tech talent, which is also very hard. One thing is attracting them, the other thing is retaining them, because they get to an automotive organization, you attract them from a tech company, they see what the culture is, oh wow, I'm out in 2 weeks. That's basically it. So that doesn't work. Therefore, what this means is that even that many automakers say, yes, software is priority number one, actually it isn't. In reality, it isn't. When push comes to shove, when decisions need to be made, it's something else. It's about producing and selling cars. It's not about the software. And this leads us to a major issue. So the future, the success, is in making money with a connected car and making money with software, obviously. So that means that automakers need to transform into software-first organizations that think service first and product second. So it means focusing on selling services, digital services, of course, more than focusing on selling the car. And I know this might seem like a dream. Yes, true, but again, the future of these organizations will depend on that. And that means that in the end, connected car organizations cannot and should not be restricted by, let's say, the traditional automotive thinking. Things like, for instance, I remember talking with an automaker once that was developing preventive maintenance, let's say, system as part of their connected car program. And they said, oh, we don't want to go too far because otherwise we'll cut out the dealers. So it can't be. So obviously that's old thinking, that doesn't work. So things like, for instance, how do you promote connected services? How do you sell connected services? You want to depend on dealers. Things like this matter a lot because you need to have, let's say, a full visibility of the value chain of connected services, otherwise it's not going to work. So this means that connected car organizations need to be self-standing, profit-driven organizations that are in full control of their destiny. Otherwise it's not going to work. So this is extremely important. The other aspect is basically how to generate value to the end customer. And basically, unfortunately, there's still very much the habit of defining the technical foundation, and then after that, all right, let's see what we can do in terms of digital services. So you're limited by the art of possible, which doesn't work. So instead of that, the starting point should be, okay, let's look at vehicle users, and let's see what are their needs, both within the vehicle and in adjacent areas. And let's develop the use cases. And then afterwards, we'll develop the technology that is going to enable that. And if this is done, then in the end, yes, you can be sure that, yes, you can overtake Tesla. If that doesn't happen, well, then we'll see that by the end of the decade, there will be a much different automotive reality from the one we know today. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks. Also, from my side, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm also very excited about to see that Carissa is looking into business aspects more than it was done in the past. I think this is exactly what you also were introducing, that bridging technology and business is a key to basically just a sustainable future of all what we are doing and envisioning the connected vehicle. So if you, Steve, just jump to one side, I'm bringing maybe a little bit of a twist here in terms of vehicle and understanding of a vehicle. And my personal focus and my background is commercial vehicles, light commercial vehicles, also like Matt has shown in his introduction on the Ford company. So Mercedes-Benz vans as light commercial vehicles is already familiar with business. Also, the term commercial implies that we have a long heritage in doing business with our vehicles and that we are very strong connected to business. So when it comes to connectivity, telematics is also a very long used technology, and it's very common to be used in commercial vehicles, also coming from the heavy duty side. I think it was in 2002 when the FMS standard was introduced. It's an SAE standard today, and SIA took over, so that's a very, very highly applied standard and common technology used in heavy-duty commercial vehicles as well as light commercial vehicles. Nevertheless, it's a CAN-based standard, right? It's some technology that is like we talked about, that there is no security, there is, in terms of extensibility, huge limitations. And if we also look into the adoption of that, did this now, or did the FMS standard now pull off a huge business, and did it have a huge business impact in some niche markets? Yes, I think also in the telematics segment, and also with companies like Geotab, this is of high relevance. Nevertheless, for the OEMs, it's kind of a side business. This is something that I'm also about to change within Mercedes-Benz vans, and I'm envisioning that there is more to that. So again, coming from this CAN standard, this is for us here like common technology. We use this on a daily basis, but like the hurdle for some standard, let's call it full stack developer or web developer, to come up with a third-party application that runs on a vehicle is so high, these barriers are so high that this is something that I personally think we should tackle and lower the barriers and make it much more accessible for also third-party developers, not just we as OEMs offering those services and, let's say, make the money out of those services. But I'm only talking about, and I know that this term is also often used, but I truly mean when I talk about ecosystems, that there are standards that are so applicable that even a standard web developer can just develop a vehicle service that's able to make business in the automotive context. And this is something that we, and I was doing in a small niche market also for Mercedes-Benz. We have developed our small Linux-based ECU. We applied VSS right away. There was no big buzz out of that Mercedes now jumps on VSS. We just did it. We looked for our niche partners in the so-called upfitter segment. And this is also something I was, like Steve asked me, hey, what's an upfitter? And I said, like, in the commercial vehicle context, that's pretty obvious, and it's a symbiotic business relationship we have since decades. So we, as a producer of vans, are producing like a tin on wheels, if we want to put it like that, just highly simplified. And we have partners, and these partnerships remain since decades for, let's say, ambulance. If you see an ambulance there, it's not that we are developing all the upfitting and the equipment for ambulance, or if it's cranes, or if it's any purpose-built vehicle, but there is a big industry where we are collaborating with, and that's a decade-proven business. And my vision and my thesis here is that I want to just enable this partner and relationship, business relationship that today is based on nuts and bolts and how we can make like payload fit to each other, to the digital world by offering standards, APIs, so that those specialty upfitter companies can directly link to our vehicles and produce their own services and create this symbiotic business relationship also for digital services in the future. So that's my take. That's not the standard OEM car automotive perspective. That's a niche perspective. Nevertheless, I think in terms of business, that's something where there is music in. And so that's my thesis. And I hand over now to you, Christoph.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here as well. Thanks for having me. To bring my thesis a little bit in context, allow me to share 2 cents about what Geotab is, because I believe not everybody knows what we are doing. So Geotab is actually a fleet telematics company addressing fleet customers and providing their data to a tool, or providing tools and then portals for the fleet managers to be able to work with the data and work with their fleet. This implies obviously that we need the data in our systems and that we somehow need to access the data. From now on, until now, we used aftermarket devices, OBD dongles, to do that, and we've heard in the session before that OBD, from the perspective of an OEM, is evil, or let's say not made for telematics. Evil, so which I kind of understand, but there was no other possibility so far to really get the data out of that, out of the vehicle. So it was a mean how to get that and use that. Now the times are changing and data is available, vehicles are being connected, data is available in the OEM clouds, and my role within Geotab is to reshape the business model, to get rid of the hardware that we have today, because it is just a matter to get the data, and we don't generate profits on selling hardware. We generate revenue and profit on providing the tools to the fleet manager. Now, what we want to do is really shift the business model and work with the OEMs in 2 ways. And one way is that we say we, as a telematics service provider, can be the sales channel to the fleet market for the data the OEM captures out of the vehicle. This relates to what we heard before. The OEMs want to monetize on data. They want to commercialize the data. And we are kind of a sales channel to the fleet market for that. So we integrate the data from the OEM clouds into the Geotab system, meaning the fleet manager can access the data of his vehicles without the need of installing a hardware aftermarket device in the vehicle. But the second part we are working on with the OEMs is equally important. We have a long history, 20 years history, and experience in working with data-based business models, and also how to capture data in the vehicle, how to pre-process the data, how to process it in the cloud, and more important, how to make products out of data. And this know-how and this knowledge, I believe, is not in the core focus of an OEM. And I know this because I've worked for an OEM for 25 years, exactly in the field of telematics. So the OEMs are focusing more on the vehicle currently, and that's where my thesis comes into the play, saying there are products, there is knowledge, there are experts out there on the market that can create products out of the data, out of the technology that the OEMs have, but that only works if the TSPs and the OEMs work together. Does not mean that there can be competition. I know OEMs also offer telematics products, but there can be a combination as well. And if we go on the next slide, this is my view on how the telematics value chain works. So you start on the left side with a vehicle. From a fleet manager's perspective, you have different makes, different brands in your fleet, and that's often what OEMs don't see. If you ask a randomly chosen a representative from Ford, they talk about Ford customers. But the Ford customer is actually at the same time maybe also a Mercedes customer, because he has Ford and Mercedes in his fleet. So it's very important to take care of this multi-brand aspect a customer has. And the OEMs, they're very strong in the data gathering in the vehicle. So obviously that's their core competency, having the TCUs, having the SIM cards, having the ability to transmit the data. But here's one point where I relate to what Graham said. I'm one of those people requesting 20 hertz data. And we know it is possible because we do it, but maybe that's a separate topic. I'm just saying we have some technology and knowledge that we can offer to the OEMs as well in the field of data to make this more attractive and get more data, higher quality data out of the vehicle to provide it to the fleet customers. Now the important part here is now going from left to right. Telematics is not about data. Telematics is about the fleet management services. It's visualizing the vehicles on a map. It's a rules engine. It's the exception management that you have. It's the analytics, the big data, what you do, the information you get out of the data, and even further on a marketplace approach, being able to provide different add-ins to the product, attach different hardwares like camera systems, for example, integrate digital tachographs in the system, and so on. So this flexibility and an open ecosystem, that's what's required from the customers. And that's what I'm arguing here, saying it's not all about data, but the data is the basis, and the interface and the standards is mandatory, because most of the time today we spend in developing, maintaining APIs to different OEMs to get the data in different formats and normalizing the data, harmonizing the data, and so on. This is not very productive and not very efficient. It would be much easier if there were standards which we could apply, get the data, and not do this integration work ourselves. So that's why I'm strongly favoring OEMs opening their systems and providing third parties with their knowledge and with their experience to participate easily, but not necessarily in competition to provide best products for the customers.
Excellent, thank you for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to rewind to Ansgar's thesis, theoretically here. And we're going to ask a question for each of the theses and a question for each of the panelists. And then we'll open it up for the audience to ask questions as well. So, Ansgar, the first question is, why is a domain-wide standard like VSS that important from a business perspective?
Yeah, and I think the answer is obvious. We already had that in the previous talks as well. So if I want to open that ecosystem like Christoph is asking us to do, I need to have that common standards, because I will not find a software developer who is willing to develop something for APIs BMW is publishing. The same software publishing on, I don't know, Renault APIs, and then on Ford APIs another time. And if we also want to make that impact business-wise the most music, like Thomas said, we should have that open ecosystem as one standard so that everybody can aim for doing it once and maintaining it once and supporting it once instead of 30, 50 times.
Excellent. Okay. So Pedro, how can open source play a role in the race to connected car monetization?
Great question, Steve. So, yeah, so let's come back to the issue of culture. So obviously, the traditional establishment is trying to catch up with Tesla, and the solution is basically has been to invest billions and billions of dollars or euros, hiring thousands of software engineers, and then you see that, for instance, for Tesla to develop the Model S totally and absolutely and completely from scratch took only $1 billion and 500 software engineers. You see that there's a massive disproportion. So meaning, legacy automakers are trying to achieve, let's say, they are trying to catch up with Tesla by pouring a lot of money and a lot of resources into that. But the thing is that it's not always the biggest army that wins. We need to be careful with that. So that can be a bit of an oversight. So what this means is that basically if legacy automakers want to catch up with Tesla, the best, probably the only way, is to work together. If they don't work together, it's going to be very hard. And yes, there's still a bit of turf mentality, which is less than before, fortunately, but there needs to be much more collaboration because, you know, otherwise, let's say, what you're going to see is that your opponent is always going to be nimbler and faster because their mindset is basically, let's say, naturally tech, while you're still dealing with basically cultural issues, cultural roadblocks. So this is the first thing, work together, extremely important. The second point is that besides defining the technical foundation of what the connected car of the future needs to be, first you need to define, let's say, the use cases. Start from exactly the opposite end. So it's not about looking at the technical foundation. It's not basically doing focus group interviews to ask customers, oh, what kind of digital services do you like? No, no. When Steve Jobs developed an iPhone, they didn't ask customers what they wanted. When Elon Musk developed a Tesla Model S, they didn't ask customers what they wanted. They looked at basically the big picture. And they looked at in terms of what are the gaps in terms of end customers, of using a vehicle in adjacent areas. And this is why the industry needs to work together, to look at the use cases, to look at the needs, and then after that, to develop the technology that is going to enable those use cases. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next one, Thomas. What are the most important prerequisites to grow digital business in the light of the commercial vehicle sector?
Well, let me try to answer it in two different directions, technically and also business-wise. So technically, I think, and this is what we are talking about, like since we met here, or I think also in the Covisa organization, about standards, and having standards, having them applied, keeping them stable, and like enable others to use those standards, like being very transparent, being in the open source field to create a community around of them. So technically, I think standards is a super important key to just enable business. So from a business side itself, I think when, let's say I go again into this direction of this established business relationship between upfitters and or like third-party companies and OEMs. So in the past, I think business relationships and business models were clear, where I think in the data-driven world, they are not so clear. Coming, like just one memory I have on one VDA conference, I think it was in 2014, where the former Volkswagen CEO Martin Winterkorn was asked in a Q&A after his presentation, so Mr. Winterkorn, who owns the data? And there was short silence, and he's just said, it's ours. So maybe, I think, I don't know if it was quoted that often, but like it was straight away his perspective. I mean, Mr. Winterkorn now is not part of this company anymore. But was this a misconception? I think yes, based on this Massachusetts topic and the right to repair, there is a direction. The point I want to make here is also in terms of business relationship, and we experienced this also when I mentioned that with our ECU and the VSS opening up, we have some customers already using it, but doing contracting based on like who is delivering what service part is like OEM provided, what is the third party provided, how is the overall business model, how is, let's say also, how do we charge, is it a recurring business model, is it a one-off business model? So these things are not set. In coming back to the prerequisites, we have to make our heads around those topics to be very clear how we want to shape this business. And again, it's not only about the OEM providing a service that is just sold off once, or it's a subscription-based thing with an OEM only, but there are other participants in this ecosystem that should benefit from it as well. And again, here the business models need to be tailored and need to be clarified. So that's something that's to be done, I think.
Okay. All right. So Christoph, why should OEMs enable an open ecosystem? it would be better for them to just to do it by themselves, capture all the revenue, customer lock-in, et cetera. Different competencies and massive investment is needed. Customer decides, multi-make fleet, rising tides lift all boats. What are your thoughts on the open ecosystem approach?
Yeah, I think, yeah, from an OEM perspective, understandable if you say, well, we manufacture the car, we have the customer relationship, we want to provide the services as well, and maybe we have to differentiate between the B2C services, which are very vehicle-centric, and maybe again B2B or fleet services. So providing services to a driver, like informing about the next service due, or providing the app where you can see the fuel consumption or mileage of the vehicle or whatever, that's probably something where an OEM is very well positioned to do that and develop this kind of vehicle-centric service, all the services that enhance the driving experience for the driver. I think that's okay. But there are more services around, and where third parties can help to develop these services. Take the example we had before of the iPhone. So the iPhone was not just another regular phone. The idea behind was the App Store and allowing third-party developers to put apps on that. I know that we cannot compare cars to iPhones. I don't want to reboot the car while going full speed on the highway, that's for sure. But this is more about the ecosystem approach. So if the OEMs enable third parties to provide some kind of solution, services, whatever, based on the data on the vehicle, they will earn money, they will increase their revenues for sure, and they will extend the reach by these kind of third-party applications. That's the basics of an marketplace logic or ecosystem logic. And you mentioned that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. That's what we truly believe in. So if more customers get the experience, if more OEMs make their systems open, if more developers are enabled to let their creativity loose and develop app solution services that deliver benefit to the drivers and to the customers, it can only be beneficial for everyone. So that's why I strongly believe that it is really important to enable third parties to access vehicle data and deliver services and solutions for the OEMs.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a question to all four of you. Feel free to answer if you'd like. Thomas, you mentioned FMS as a standard that informed the commercial vehicle space, the space that you live in and day out. And there's a lot of standards that inform the industry. But as we think about how long those standards took to create, and I know in my role in Covisa, I have meetings with European Commission projects like DG GROW and ISO conveners, and when we inform them of VSS, they say, well, can you send us the document, right? And that implies that a standard is a piece of work that took years to create and can just be transferred. And so in that context, is that really, does the industry really need that kind of standard, or is there something else? Is there a different approach that would allow your organizations to more rapidly deliver what the industry really needed than just a formal standard, if you will?
I just have one small example, and thanks for also pointing out to the role or the relevance of a standard and whether that's a let's say a silent document somewhere out there, and compared to it's applied and it's in full use and people understand it and do it. So I have just this this history of VSS and how we applied it, and that's sometimes you need people, right? And I mean, always we need people. We talked about that as well, that it's hard to find talent as well. And in my case, it was just one person on a team who said, okay, I just apply VSS, and he did it. And we now have it, and we make business out of it. And that can make a difference. I don't say that that's highly applicable to the overall industry, but like my shout out here is that we should also encourage individuals to just do it. And again, also, I'm not here to shout out now the just do it mentality and this will solve all our problems. Sure. But it's the small things that we should also understand and emphasize on and empower people to just do it. And when this colleague, he did it, and he was implementing the VSS standard in Rust programming language in like 10 days. And we now have it. Sure, we extend it and we maintain it. But whenever he did this, like also over the weekend, he did not envision this. He was just technology driven. And then, like when business people come together and see the importance of what was done, good things can happen. And that's a small step. And I'm not talking about big steps, but also like encouraging people to take small steps and celebrating them is an important thing to do.
Very good. Please.
Yeah, my perspective in it, and thanks for the question, Steve. Excellent question. From my point of view, two perspectives on it. The one is that only developing standards usually is a thing which is slow. So everybody who is part of AutoSAR maybe knows what I'm talking about. And second thing is obviously that there might be different standards. So there's maybe another initiative out there who's developing such things. And that's exactly why, and the third thing, sorry, is that you also need to somehow make the standards easily accessible. Not sure whom of you, so when I heard about Covisa the first time, or Genevieve, looked at it, went to the web page, downloaded the JSON file. Honestly, I didn't browse the JSON file because maybe I'm not too technical for that, but I selected the CSV file, imported that to Excel, browsed through the standards, and it was tough to understand what different VSS leaves are there which I can make use of. So we need technology to adopt that standards and implement that standards in something bigger. And please join my colleague Dirk, who's showing something tomorrow where we try doing that. And the second thing is joint standards, as I mentioned, are slow. That's exactly why we as Bosch founded an initiative where my friend Michael from the Eclipse Foundation is going to tell you later on, where we think like, okay, we need to build technology around it. We build that technology open source because we want to develop something. And if then other parties believe that this is valuable, they join and they drive that development and thereby build the standard instead of sitting 5 years deciding on the right content of a standard, which needs to be standardized, etc. And we are marrying that. So we are using the VSS and VSC standards within that technologies we are developing there, but we would like to go code first. So let's solve the problem, find others who are finding it valuable to solve those problems, join us in solving their problems, and thereby build the standard itself.
You know, actually, fundamentally, sorry, I don't know if you want to go first. Or, okay, that's all right. Sorry. Yeah, so I fundamentally agree with you. And let's look, for instance, you know, about 10 years ago, you could enter a Tesla and drive off just using your smartphone. No other car could do that. Tesla already had plug and charge 10 years ago. Today, most EVs still don't have it. And were they waiting for standards? No, they did their own thing. Doesn't mean that standards don't matter. Standards do matter a lot. But the industry needs to work together, but it's not about endless discussions about, oh, I think this is better, or I think that is better. It's about having a more agile approach, let's say what I like to call the law of natural selection, in the sense that try it, do something, and what really works will become clear very, very soon, very easily. And then when it works, basically you work together with your partners, with the rest of the industry, to basically build standardization because you want to reduce cost. They say, look, we implemented this, it works wonderfully, let's standardize this because we want to reduce costs. And that's the way to do it, rather than having endless discussions, you know, in terms of, I think I know better or you think you know better. No, it's about changing the way of collaborating in terms of building standardization. That's how it should be done.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to the audience for any questions for our panelists.
I do have a question.
Yeah, please.
So I'm Mike Ittner with Wind River. I'm the Digital Transformation Officer for Automotive. I do have a question. As you're talking about use cases, how do you feel that organizations are dealing with the use cases and more derivative, the monetization of those use cases? Because what I'm seeing right now, having discussions with the OEMs, is that they understand use cases and monetization at a very high level, but there's a big disconnect between that and mapping it back to the technology. And if they keep waiting, they're going to miss the boat. What do you think about that?
Please.
Well, I can answer it. I can share about my perspective. You know, I agree with what you say. So there is the beginning of something. So, but auto companies are starting to understand that, yes, software is the future, connected car is the future, but the problem is that there's still a lot of politics inside, you know, and a lot of legacy thinking, you know, in the sense is, as I was saying, the case of preventive maintenance. Can we basically improve the level of preventive maintenance of our vehicles? Yeah, technology enables it. But if we do that, we cut out our dealers, you know, that cannot be. Tesla doesn't need to worry about that, for instance, you know. So it's about the legacy thinking that, and a lot of people inside the organization, you know, that are not tech-minded, are basically still living in the past century, that are blocking what software can achieve, you know. And until this changes, until the auto companies, the legacy auto companies become software first, tech first, and then hardware follows software, then it's always hard. You know, it will go, auto companies will evolve, but it's a little bit like trying to run with a big iron ball attached to your ankle. No, it's pretty hard, you know, but so that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I come from the enterprise application and architecture space outside of automotive initially, and it's funny, I watch it. I mean, there is a lot of resistance. They seem to want to go work backwards from the problem all the way to the solution instead of looking at what needs to happen and then working it back down to the technology. So interesting, thank you for that.
And maybe there's one point to add besides culture and software first. Practical problems. The business model of an OEM is selling hardware, cars, to wholesalers that sell the car to dealers. That's what their systems and processes can do. They are not able to do micropayments for recurring subscription services. So that's really a practical problem, which they have to learn as well. And changing systems and processes, everybody knows this, how difficult that can be and how long it takes.
Okay, thank you.
And one thing I'd like to add to the question is, my observation is that currently everybody is asking the other party what might be the use case, right? So the tech companies are asking the automotive companies, the automotive asking the tech companies. Sometimes somebody is going straight forward and having a wonderful idea, saying, okay, how could I, for example, use data out of cars and their parking sensors to find parking lot in cars, putting that to the cloud, everybody can consume that data and easing up the hurdle of finding free parking lots. And then business-wise, in the end, figuring out that, okay, if I'm doing it only with one car line or maybe one OEM is doing that, the entire ecosystem is not big enough. So that makes no business value in the first shot. And that comes back to what Christoph is saying is, so we need to open that ecosystem because if that would work with every brand and every car in the world, that's a huge business value which comes out of it.
Yeah, excellent.
I also want to add, again, like the business aspect and understanding the business models behind monetization of data. Like just one example, I think also it was with Car2Go, where in the past they have opened up for free their APIs for anyone to use, not understanding basically the overall market about that. And what happened is that like other companies used those APIs and added API calls with multiple other APIs to just sit on top of the ecosystem to provide like mobility, like overarching in a city, for example. And just by not like charging an API in the beginning can be just a mistake you make also right in the beginning. Therefore, it's very important and crucial to understand the mechanisms and leverages, I just throw in another word, pricing. It's like for an OEM in the classical business, it's easy to define pricing. We have our mechanisms with standards and extras, and this is all understood for decades. But pricing in terms of digital services is hard. It's not easy. And like we all learned that within the last couple of years when the iPhone was introduced about micropayments and what is an app worth, basically. In the beginning, it was 79 cents. That's cheap, right? Mm-hmm. And now, like, what's the fine price point? Again, that's another business question that's not finally solved, and this needs to be understood throughout the industry.
No, thank you. I develop monetization models, and it's very complex. It's a lot of spreadsheet work and then working it backwards into the technology. Can you actually do it? Can you deliver it? What does it cost? What's the break? How much money are you going to make on it? Very interesting. So thank you for the answers, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Other questions from the audience? Yes. Please.
Hi, Chris Tingley from Kunja. I'm really interested to hear more about where you think some of the business model innovation is going to go for third-party software providers. Christoph, you spoke earlier about how you developed OBD dongles to kind of transform and homogenate all that data together. But when we get to an ecosystem where that data is all commoditized, how are these third-party service providers actually going to start adding additional value on there when it's effectively sort of leveled the playing field for everyone? You've effectively solved that hard problem in the past, and when that becomes easier, how do you sort of see that evolving?
Yeah, and I think that's the creativity of the crowd. Whatever a problem is, there is to solve, there is a solution for that, and for sure I'm not that creative that I can find solutions for all problems a driver or a fleet manager can have. But that's exactly what my ask is, that we enable what you mentioned, that there is a level playing field for everyone, and then everyone who has the ability to provide solutions for real life problems is able to deliver this kind of solution to the customer. That would be a huge step forward, and this can be anything from finding parking space to, I don't know, in-vehicle payment. I mean, these are not all new ideas, but there will be more and more new ideas to come if you open the doors, as we know from the past. Then creativity flows, and that's what I hope.
And from my point of view, it's not only about finding the new, innovative, and I don't know, breaking new business model patterns. So we know all the business model patterns already, and there are a lot of and maybe also enough. From my perspective, it's key to have some kind of a rethinking, because the new earning money is not like one company is earning money with a business model by transforming a product or a service, giving it to someone, and he's getting paid for that, or he's paying for that, sorry. But it's like, okay, let's meet on eye level, 2 companies, 3 companies, maybe an ecosystem of company, and see how can we maybe have a joint business model. And that's something which for many companies in the automotive section is, yeah, something new and something where the mindset needs also to shift towards to.
Okay. Just real quick.
Yeah. So the thing here is that what we'll see, and I'm sure that probably several of you already heard about the EU Data Act that has been approved by the European Commission in February. That the future is that automakers will have to share data with third parties, and to make that very easy. Of course, there will be some loopholes, but that's what the regulation is going to say. That doesn't mean that third-party providers are going to be very good at doing a lot with that data. So, what I have to say, and I know this feels a little bit vague, but the companies that are the best at being customer-centric will win. And believe me, most companies are not customer-centric. Incredibly enough, they fail to understand the customer. So if you dedicate a lot of time in understanding the customer, the needs of the vehicle users, these are the companies that will win. So therefore, you have it. Focus on the customer, and you will win.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, let's thank our panelists and for their thoughts. Thank you, gentlemen.